All right, it's December 9. This is Service API's meeting, and we've got plenty to discuss, it looks like. I wanted to call attention, even if you're not interested in talking about Service APIs, that KubeCon CFP is coming up way faster than you would think it would. The event isn't until May, but we need to get any CFPs in, any talk proposals in soon. I think it's Sunday is the deadline. So Harry and I have been working on a talk proposal for service APIs. And I just would love some additional feedback. It could help us have a better idea of how we should try to introduce service APIs at KubeCon. But this does not need to be the only talk that exists. I've also had some interest in something like a panel proposal. If anyone is interested, it could be a panel of people that are either implementing, using, or even among maintainers of these APIs. I don't think that's expressly required, but if there's interest in being involved in KubeCon and talking about service APIs, I think there's definitely additional space for that. Yeah, just, if anyone's interested, feel free to say so now or in Slack or whenever that comes out. And then in addition, for this talk proposal, we've got a lot of different options here. And this is very rough, but we'd appreciate feedback just so that we know that we're covering the things that we should be and have the right perspective on things. Cool. All right. The next thing, focus for December, as much as it would be good to get some new things in, some new features in, some new bits of code, whatever, we're trying to restrain from that and do the bits of maintenance and maybe less exciting work just so that we have a good foundation here for the API we do have. So that means we really should have a validating webhook. And it looks like, Chris, you volunteered to take this on. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Chris, do you have any questions about what we're thinking here or any thoughts on what you might do or work on?
The one question I had is, does anybody know of any examples? I mean, I'm sure they're out there. I just don't know. With it being a outside of tree webhook, does anyone know if anyone else has done that with the sort of template that we've used on GitHub? Because I'm sure there's plenty of out of tree admission controllers. I just don't know if there's any special sauce for the specific like project creator thing that we're using, if that makes sense. Can you guys not hear me?
No, we can. I mean, there are plenty of examples. I have built one validation webhook myself. So, and that's open source in Kong itself. So I can point you to that. Like the machinery all exists, but I don't know if in service APIs, it being like an out of tree thing, does it need a special webhook or just a regular one, like how, like multiple projects implemented, like Istio also implements it, I think. So we can use the same machinery to implement it.
Yeah, I worked on the Istio webhook, like, so it must have been a couple of years ago by now. So, but I'm sure some stuff has changed. This is basically just creating like a plugin per se, right? Like it's like a entry. It's everything stored under the plugin thing, and then you just opt into it by saying at the API level what you want to have. But if it's external, is there a different process behind that?
I think
so. Can't you use the Cube Builder stuff?
That's what I was wondering. Like just Cube Builder.
It generates something.
It generates something.
I'm
It
not.
can.
Yeah, I think it already has a code there.
Okay, yeah,
We've
that-
gotten rid of a lot of the KubeBuilder boilerplate, but the structure is still similar enough that I think if you did another KubeBuilder generate, I forget the specific command, you can instruct it to create some boilerplate webhook code. That boilerplate webhook code is not amazing, at least the last time I tried it, but it is a starting point.
okay. I might just try that as a starting point, and if
Yeah.
not, I'll just go with, what I know from the normal stuff.
And I'll try to send you a link, Chris. I wrote it using, I think, client Go and some basic machinery without KubeBuilder, and essentially you do like you implement an HTTP handler func in Go, and that's about it, right? So it's not too complicated to do like a simple one. So let me send you that too.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna start working on that today then. I'm just working on getting the code base built since it's been a while since I touched it.
Cool. Yeah, and let us know if there's any not obvious parts of that. We could definitely use some better documentation around that process. And
Sounds
also, sorry if I missed anything in the first bit of when you were talking. I had some fun audio difficulties where Zoom likes to set my audio output to be my microphone, which obviously doesn't work, so I can't hear anyone.
Okay.
Yes.
I wondered if it was me because I saw you shaking your head, so I thought.
No, sorry. Cool. Okay. Well, yeah, thank you for taking that on. Don't hesitate to reach out if any of us can help with anything. Yeah. And conformance tests, I've volunteered to start working on this, but this is a big project, I think, that could be, Steve, you have an example webhook. That looks awesome.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Yeah,
No,
I wrote that.
that's great.
I wrote that a while ago. So it was when Contour used ingress route, but it looks at a CRD, so the concept should still apply, I think. But again, I think it's been 2 years looking at the history now, so it may not even be. Things may have progressed since then, but yeah.
That sounds like around the same timeline that I wrote my last webhook, and I don't know.
Yeah,
mine was not pretty, so this is probably a good starting point. Cool. Yeah, so I volunteered to start work on conformance tests, but I am very open to any help. I really want to start with as small a foundation as possible so that we can get more people involved quickly. But the work that I know Alejandro and others have done on ingress controller conformance is really awesome. I was digging back in here this morning, I think, just to make sure it had everything I actually wanted. And there's a lot of great content in here. So as an example, in state, there's something that already exists for capturing a round trip request, which then goes out to, HTTP is the one that has the bulk of that logic. But I think what they've done here, it obviously overlaps a lot with what we're trying to work on. So I'm going to reach out and see if there's any way that we can reasonably share code, or if we should really just copy it for now and worry about sharing code a little bit later on. But I do like the approach here, and this would be my preference to follow this same approach. If you haven't seen these tests, I think it's like a cucumber based approach or similar to that. And so you see requests like this, tests written out like this, which takes a bit to get used to, but I think it's a really clever way to do it. So that's what I'm thinking. I think, Chris, you've been involved in this process as well, and maybe others.
Yeah, I reviewed some of the V1 stuff.
Okay.
Nothing for V2 yet, though.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I had a look at this a while ago, and like I found it difficult to wrap my head around like the whole feature thing, and then they
Yeah.
write code. But I'll try to take another look at this. It was it was not like not the usual conformance way of doing things.
Yes. Yeah. The first few times I looked at this, I didn't really like it. I'm beginning to come around to this style, but that does not mean we have to use this approach. Is anyone on this call, was anyone on this call involved in the design of these tests? I think maybe Bowie, you did some work around this
Yes.
as well. Yeah.
I think, yeah, there's some automated workflows. It's worth just running through them to figure out what needs to be fixed. What I do like is that you have a almost textual representation of what the behavior should be. Because typically I find that at least the way the current Kubernetes conformance tests have kind of come about is just to take existing E2E tests and just kind of say, hey, that's also conformance. Whereas this one kind of goes more towards writing out what the behavior should be and then having the tests reflect that. It is kind of awkward in that it relies on some code generation. So that's not super great. But at least the current state is that the code generation is fairly streamlined. And there are static checks to, if you make a goof, that it tells you about it. The overall Cucumber framework actually didn't have that. So that was extremely confusing. Basically, it would generate an initial skeleton, and then after that, you're on your own. And then the only way to know that kind of your test didn't match up would be to run the test. And then it would kind of detect that, oh, your like text didn't quite line up. And that was very confusing. So I would run through the workflow just to see if it makes more sense.
Is that in a make file?
Yeah, so you run make, and there's some hack verify that basically validates the feature that the text that you wrote, which is some YAML thingy, actually matches the generated code.
Okay.
And the general, this definitely needs a style guide for writing, because you can easily create the YAML representation and make maintaining the test very annoying. But generally speaking, I think the style guide is to like use the least bits that result in like lots of generated code as much as possible, and then basically use the YAML just as a way to describe the behavior, and then put all the logic of like matching stuff into one function that you end up implementing on the unit test side. So in some sense, it's like there should be a minimum set of generated code that you're trying to make work out, and mostly it's like a nice way to match up the descriptive stuff with the actual test. It also generates very beautiful reports, so that's like a bonus.
Okay, that's nice. Cool. And where does the code gen go? Would that be? Well, I guess that doesn't matter. But yeah, I'll follow
look in
up.
hack.
Okay.
You can see the code gen is there.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
The repo could use a little bit of a refactoring to kind of pull some of the code gen code out.
Yeah.
What I would do is I would just try running it and adding a thing, and then seeing if you understand how it works.
Yeah.
And then of course this thing should obviously be improved. If it's not understandable.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to read some more into this. but it does look like some great work has already been done and a great foundation here that seems like it's worth building on. There's going to be a lot of overlap between Ingress controller conformance and service APIs conformance, I would think, at least in terms of behavior. Like you look at a test and it's basically something like that will apply some form of YAML and then expect a certain behavior, which usually result, request foo and expect bar. So that general pattern seems to be very similar to what we're working on or what we want to accomplish here. Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, does anyone else have thoughts on conformance? Anyone really like or hate this kind of pattern that has been shown with Ingress controller conformance?
By the way, the recommendation, talking to multiple people, is that don't use Ginkgo. So
yeah,
it's either this or something else. Everyone I talked to about Ginkgo and conformance was like, oh, we kind of regret using it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm happy to help too, Rob, on
Cool.
this if you want someone else. I don't have any strong opinions either way, but I'm looking for a way to jump into this.
Oh, hey.
This SIG and do some things. So if this is a good spot, then that's cool for me.
This is an awesome spot. I'll try and get just like a baseline bit to get started, and then hopefully we can have a lot of people contributing from there, adding additional tests, because conformance is one of those things that could expand and expand and expand. Yeah, that would be awesome. I would love any help and contributions along the way. Thanks. Cool. The other thing that we want to think about here is docs improvements. I know that we've already gotten plenty in since V1 Alpha 1, and Harry, I think your TCP route one I guess it's not quite merged, but it's about to be. I've lost track, but we're still getting new docs improvements coming in. One of the ones that came in, that came up recently, is we have discussed in the past that it would be very helpful to have some examples of ingress configuration and show how they could be mapped to service APIs configuration. Right now, we don't have anything like that. So if anyone is looking for, some additional docs work, that could be a good area to improve. But also, if you're reading through docs and just find something like that isn't clear or isn't documented at all, file an issue and/or PR to fix it would be great.
If you're really enterprising, you could write a translator.
That's what
and
yes.
And if you're really, really enterprising, you could run the translator using Nscriptum and put it on the web page.
No, I mean, it's not a bad idea. Like we did it for a couple of custom resources internally at Song, and like Ingress is so simple, and like service APIs, is a superset. So generating HTTP route from Ingress resources, at least for the in-tree implementation, right? Not taking care of any custom annotations is doable. Yeah,
that is true. Yeah, that would be fun. Okay, yeah. The next thing I wanted to say, actually, while I'm talking about docs improvements, the other thing, we have an open issue to explore other doc alternatives to make docs, because right now the tooling we have has a number of issues. Most notably, if we try to enable search, it is going to result in get conflicts all the time, speaking from prior experience. And then second, with the system we have right now, there's not a great way to have version docs. So whenever we start working on V1 Alpha 2, it's going to be hard to separate docs for V1 Alpha 2 versus V1 Alpha 1. So I know there are other docs tools out there. Harry has an issue where we're tracking anything on that, but I don't know of anyone. Harry, have you done any further follow-up or research of tools, or anyone else?
I spent a little bit of time and looked at what Upstream does. They use Hugo with a
Yeah.
Doxy theme, and that seems to be working okay. There is a little bit of like helper code that we can borrow, like some make files and Docker files to do that, and that I think will work for us.
Okay.
So I think that seems like a good path to at least experiment and see if if we run into any issues. Yeah, I haven't had time to actually try it out, but if somebody's wants to try it out, it's not too difficult to get like a simple demo working. I think
Cool.
getting like all bits and pieces together, like okay, versioning works as expected, and auto generating like the specification, and then putting that in Markdown. I think a lot of what we have can be reused, but yeah, we need to spend some time to actually get it done.
Cool. That'd be awesome. Yeah, is anyone interested in taking that one on? Cool. Well, yeah, just looks like Harry added, or someone added the issue there. Feel free to assign yourself if you're interested. Cool. All right, so the next thing I had on here was to discuss release cadence. And for release cadence, we obviously released V1 Alpha 1 a few weeks ago now, and we have had 41 commits, which is a surprising amount since V1 Alpha 1. And I've been trying to figure out at what point does it make sense to release an update. We already have changes in here that would preclude a patch fix, so we'd have to do a minor version bump. And so we're talking about an 0.2.0 release at this point. I've personally been thinking, with holidays upcoming and everything, that maybe aiming for sometime in January is appropriate for the next release. But I wanted to check in with others here, see if that timeline is reasonable, or if we should really try and get something out before then or after then.
So we need to decide if we want to do like a time-based release, or do we do like a feature-based release when we think we have enough significant changes, and then we do a release, right? So I think we have made a lot of additions to docs and fixed a lot of those things. We probably have added in maybe 1 or 2 API changes as far as I think since we've an alpha 1. So yeah, I mean, how do people feel like should we do like regular cadence, every 2 months or something like that, or every month, maybe a bit aggressive, or should we do like bundle in a lot of things together and then put it out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I had been leaning towards setting a date and saying this is when we will release 0.2.0, but I don't know if I'm ready to commit to a cadence beyond that. And that's because at some point we are going to want to switch gears from updating V1 Alpha 1 to preparing for V1 Alpha 2 or V1 Beta 1, depending on how the API is going and what kind of feedback we get. So if we said, oh, we're going to release updates every 2 months, but then, say 2 months after 0.2.0, we're actually more focused on a V1 Alpha 2 or something else, a more significant release, it would be hard to pull back from that kind of cadence. So my thought is maybe we start with a relatively firm date for our next release, but not go any further than that yet. I don't know. Maybe I'm open to locking things down further as well.
So another thought that I had was, so we are working on less flashy things like like validation webhook, conformance, which is, our priority right now, and documentation. So, and adding features, we won't be able to devote much time to that. So those two, so having a 0.2.0 sooner does not get us much out, right? Because
I agree.
so we
Yeah.
won't be able to get a much features out if we are focusing on the other things. So maybe we just, yeah, I don't know how to set a date right now.
Yeah.
The plan we have.
Yeah, that's fair. So the things that I'm most interested in getting out right now are actually what I would classify as bug fixes. They're not really substantial, but they do include things to fix it, like fixing this default value and fixing some code comments. And I think there was maybe another default or validation fix. I can't remember which. We also increased a validation value for Knative. And I imagine changes like that would be helpful for implementations to be able to reference. So I can imagine, so even if our 0.2.0 isn't necessarily a huge release, if it allows implementations of this API to move forward and still pin to a specific version of the API, I think that could be helpful. But I agree. If we release a new, an 0.2.0 incremental update to the API in January, we're not going to have any significant changes. I can't imagine. Well, maybe, I don't know. Does anyone else have thoughts on versioning here? Harry, I think I cut you off. I think you were about to say something.
No, I mean, I think in that case, maybe, if we don't want to be like a big feature pack release, we can set a date. I don't know, like 10th January. I just randomly picking up a date and just stick to it, and that's better, right? Like, and then what goes in, doesn't go in, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we can set a date and just do it, if that helps. Another thing, yeah. What if, like, if there are these minor changes, like if we recommend users using like a git commit, like using Go modules, you can pin to a specific commit as well, and that avoids a release. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but that's an alternative option where, if somebody is looking for a bug fix that is already in the master branch, so we can advise them to pin their dependency, the Go dependency, to that specific version. Because if it's a documentation change, they don't need to do anything. If it's a manifest, like a CRD definition change, then they do need to pin that.
Yeah, it's the manifest changes that I'm concerned about. And right now it doesn't matter that much. Like, people can just pull from master and be all right. Where this is going to become a little bit more problematic and is going to be when we have the potential for multiple implementations using and relying on the same CRDs, the same version of the same CRDs. It would be helpful to have some kind of practice of, and maybe this doesn't matter for so early on in V1 Alpha 1, but as we proceed, I think it would make sense to have additional releases or some kind of precedent that will have minor releases through the life cycle of beta and maybe even GA that add features. And so you can say our implementation supports the V1 APIs, specifically V1.1 of Service APIs. I'm not sure what makes sense here. Versioning is difficult for a project like this. But I would hate to see long-term sustained use of pinning to commits or pinning to master branch. But for now, this is probably all a moot point. It probably doesn't matter that much as we're all still early in the implementation side of things.
Yep, I agree.
Cool. Okay, well, for now, I think I will go ahead and create a tentative milestone for 0.2.0 just so we have some semblance of what to work towards and when something might get out. But I think January sometime is fine. I don't even know. I am not sure quite yet what the date is, but we can say we will release another version of the API in January and have something that you can pin to if that's valuable. But I think the main thing is that we do not plan on a new version to release in December. Yeah. Okay. The next bit was issue triage. Harry, thank you for adding a few issues, a couple issues for us to talk through. John, are you on? John is not on this call. This was an interesting issue that got a decent bit of discussion around it. I haven't read it fully, but I seem to remember the key idea being to further subset what a gateway applied to. Am I remembering this right? I think, Harry, you might have responded here.
Yeah, so I mean, the gist of the issue is that you have a gateway resource, and let's say you have 5 proxies, in cluster proxies that are running. Now, which proxy actually, or which deployment, or Kubernetes service, whatever you want to, specify, actually is implementing that specific gateway. So how do you do that? So John here is proposing that we add a selector on the gateway resource, which specifies which deployment or which service implements that specific gateway. So that's the issue, and that's a good problem. I was thinking about the same problem with Kong as well, and this is apparently very common in Istio and service meshes, where you can have a number of gateway in cluster proxies, and they can implement different gateway resources. Up until now, I think we discussed this once before in one of the office hours, where how the gateway is implemented is not the concern of the API, right? Like any of the service can implement that gateway, or and the gateway status reflects which service is it, right? Like you could have a named address or an IP address, whatever the network endpoint is, right? Be it a load balancer or a cluster IP or whatever be it. And that was it. So that's why this issue is interesting, where how much do we want to connect these two pieces together?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I think some of the comments had mentioned that this feels like something that had originally been intended for gateway class to solve. I remember with other ingress controllers, ingress class kind of accomplished a similar concept to this. This feels like a little bit more granular than that even, and I can imagine that you could have some creative uses of this, like select, I really want this to be served by some instance, something that is in this specific region or zone, as kind of a more abstract idea of this.
Yeah, and I think with the gateway class, the point is like the creation of gateway class is considered a privileged operation.
Yep.
So that sort of creates more burden in creating gateways. So the reason I wanted to bring this up was I think this is important early on issue. So
Yep.
people have thoughts, so like give it some thought and then add in comments where they can.
The one that, and I know he's not sold on this specific example, but we have so many selectors in this API, and adding one more, we'll have to be very, if we were to do this, we'd have to be very clear about the name, so that people didn't confuse this with how I select the routes or resources that this should target, as an example. Yeah, every new field we add has some cost in terms of complexity. But yeah, it's an interesting use case. I don't have strong feelings yet on this, but I appreciate you bringing this up. Anyone else have thoughts?
Rob, do we imagine that things like gateway parameters and gateway class parameters are kind of a staging area for capabilities that we're not quite sure whether they should be first class or not yet? Because I mean, really, parameters is effectively, a dumping ground for anything that doesn't go first class into either the gateway class or the gateway. And so the exact same thing could be in a custom parameters CRD. I don't know. It definitely sets some bad practice around allowing people to just dump a lot of stuff there, but it could also potentially serve as a staging ground for capabilities. I'm not sure about yet.
Yeah, that's a really good
I would
point.
say annotations would be a staging ground, really.
So I would say it depends on how you want access control to work. If you want a gateway admin to be able to control this, then yeah, an annotation is appropriate. But if you want to restrict this to gateway class admins, then yeah, gateway class parameters seems to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think like staging or not is independent. The choice between class, param, and gateway is, as Rob said, the permissions and role.
We don't have a gateway parameters, otherwise that would also be a good place to put that in. Actually, that might be an idea worth exploring.
Wait, we don't have a what parameter?
A gateway parameter. We have.
Oh, yeah.
We have a gateway class that's spec.parameters, but we don't have.
Yeah. Got it.
I would say for custom stuff, it would just use annotations, even though people don't like them. Like a parameters reference that then is basically a CRD. Maybe it just seems like you're kind of constructing annotations.
So why would we have a parameters reference on gateway class and not gateway? Like, why wouldn't we just use an annotation on gateway class in that case?
I think it's, well, we can look at we did discuss this, I think.
Yeah.
But the issue with gateway, I think, was that gateway class is hard to see that it's portable, but gateway is intended to be more portable.
Sure.
Like class, the conception was that if you're talking about a particular class of gateways, that is inherently talking about some implementation. Whereas the gateway, that's probably where the trade-off came from.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, this needs a bit more thought, I think. I appreciate the comments, though, that this may not need to be a top-level field to start, that we can test out this kind of functionality either as an annotation or a parameter, and if it's a common enough desire, we can first class it at that point. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to 451. Yes, external traffic policy. one of the things that I've been thinking about more recently, and this issue is a good example of that, is service APIs is partially something like that can build on the Ingress API and allow for more complex configuration. But it's also something like that can build on and maybe eventually replace the service type load balancer and things related to that. And so in this case, external traffic policy seems entirely relevant here. But I guess we need to think a little bit about how it exists right now is how we would want it to exist in the future, or if there are any changes or differences we would want at this point.
Yeah, I just wanted to get like an initial feel of like how we feel about this issue, because this wasn't discussed before, and this is a little bit different than what we have been working on in the API.
Yeah.
Right? It's an expansion, a valid expansion of the API, but it's an area where we haven't given much thought to. So probably another topic where everyone can just have this thread running in the back of their mind, and then we can come back to it probably later at some point.
Does this feel like it's the kind of thing that should be in scope for this API?
I'm not sure yet.
Yeah.
If we do get into the area of, okay, we want to take some things inside the service resource and move them inside this new API, I think we should start with what will be our objectives and like what things we do want to touch in the service resource and what things we don't want to, because otherwise it's very easy to make a gateway the kitchen sink of all these problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, wouldn't this almost seems like it would go on the route because external, or like this would be not clear. Like there's external traffic policy, and I guess there's internal traffic policy.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that's really talking about a particular way to send traffic around, as opposed to something that is more at the gateway level.
Yeah, but this is more like, so the service resource has external traffic policy, right? Where you send traffic directly to the service, or you can send it via kube proxy, and then there is a client IP that gets preserved or not preserved. So I think this is primarily about that and moving that over into this resource, gateway resource.
Yeah, and that second part is so there's two main components as I understand the implementation here, right? There's any related load balancer configuration based on how it does health checks, basically how it routes traffic, and so that it only routes traffic to nodes that have ready endpoints for a service. But then the second part of that is a change to kube proxy. And that change to kube proxy is where this gets complicated. Is kube proxy something that should be aware of these APIs? Because so far nothing in core has to rely on service APIs. And if we were to support functionality like this, we'd have to figure out how that would work in proxy implementations.
Yeah, so I think we have been having these discussions, like a one-off discussion. So service APIs is more than ingress, right? But we need to probably spend some time, or have we have to, like, if we do want to go in that direction, we'll have to carve out the set of problems we do want to attack and we don't want
Yeah.
to, right? Just because of otherwise the scope becomes a bit too large, I think, and we run into the same problem as service.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something we don't really want. So
Yeah. Yeah, agree with that. Cool. It looks like those were the only issues called out, but I think there's a couple more issues that have come up recently. One, thanks for filing this, Harry. We should remove any old references to namespace in our examples. Some of our examples have a hard-coded default namespace, which is less than ideal. So removing that makes complete sense. If anyone is looking for a really easy initial contribution, this would be it. So there's a good first issue somewhere here, right? Yeah. We have already discussed this one from John. And the other one was the alternative doc generation, which we've discussed indirectly today. So there are a few open PRs, so I want to go there. Oh, looks like some people have approved PRs. Thank you. I think this one has been stuck for a bit, and I wanted to go ahead and make sure that we unstick it. I'd placed a hold on this because I wasn't sure what we wanted to do with API additions at this stage. We had not actually documented that adding fields to the API was actually acceptable. My PR that clarifies that has merged in now, and it has said that we will or we may add additional fields to an existing API version. This follows Kubernetes versioning, whatever. It is a pretty standard idea, but we've now explicitly said it, so I think I can remove the hold on this PR at least. I think this is a very reasonable request. We have a header filter that allows adding and removing headers, but we do not have a set. So I did a little bit of digging, and at first I thought it was going to be complicated for some implementations, but it does seem like this is fairly universally supported. This feels like a very straightforward suggestion to me. Does anyone have any hesitation around letting this in?
I think there was another issue that came up of ordering, where the way you do set, add, remove, it makes a difference of, the output will be different. So we
Yeah.
will be sure to track that. I think now, so this can get in, and then that remains like a bug or another enhancement, or that issue could block this.
Can we, that's a really good question. Remind me, for filters, can you define multiple filters of the same type in a row?
That I think is undefined behavior. I need to go back and check.
Because we could potentially make this more of a union type thing where you can, well, I don't know if we need to require this, but you could essentially say that each request header filter should only contain a set, add, or remove. And if you want another one, you add another thing in the list.
So yeah, so the doc comment we have, sorry for interrupting, is a
Oh,
core filter multiple times has unspecified or custom conformance.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, yeah, it was me. Cool. Okay. I guess the other option here is that we have a consistent way where we always we always add before set before, well, we always, what would be appropriate default? We would always remove before, add before set. Something like that. You would have a consistent behavior where if multiple were specified, it always happened in this order. And if you wanted a custom order, you could split that out into multiple request header filtered statements. Yeah, this does need some more work. But it is not unique to this PR. So I'd agree with the idea that this discussion does not need to block getting set in yet. So Harry, did you say there's already a follow-up issue for the ordering discussion?
There is. I'm trying to look for it and I could not find it.
Okay.
480. Okay. Here's the
Okay. Yeah, great. Okay. Cool. Well, does anyone have any hesitation about this addition to the API?
If we did specify that you did removes before adds, then what would this actually do that you couldn't do with remove and add?
Nothing. That's a good point. It's just a very common thing that seems to exist in a lot of proxy implementations already, and so although it would make no fundamental difference, it would require slightly less lines of code, and maybe slightly easier to reason about. But you're right that we have the tools in place to do this without a set field.
Does it make sense that add also has set semantics? Because, oh yeah, actually that's not true. Headers you can repeat and they get concatenated together in a special way.
Yeah.
Yuck.
Yes.
And we just double checked, like this is not something, I think that every provider kind of supports this.
Yeah. Yeah. Some have a slightly different, so some use add with an option to like a Boolean replace type field. And others have separate, add set or add replace. I forget the terminology that's common, but set is a relatively common construct.
Yeah, another word I think some proxies uses append instead of add.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, if you have any more thoughts, definitely feel free to add them here. I'm going to go ahead and remove a hold on this. And if I don't hear anything, if there's no more comments on here in the next 24 hours, I'll just go ahead and improve it. Anyone else is welcome to do that as well. Cool. I think that's about it. I know we're close to time here. Actually, Danian, I saw you were doing a bit more work. I think you were doing a bit more work on this PR. Do you have any updates here?
I have not touched that in a while. I thought
Maybe
we
they were
were
just
holding on to this.
Okay. Micaiah added some comments. That's what it was. Okay. Yeah,
we
I mean,
put this on hold and trying to figure out, well, is this something that would be in somewhere else in the APIs?
Yeah. I'm
talking
still
about the
not sure
backend
where
policy.
this belongs. I know initially I thought, oh, backend policy would be the place.
Right.
But then kind of backed away from that. I'm open to revisiting this. Maybe in our next meeting if we want to. There's no more reason to delay on something like this. But obviously, I guess our main priorities are the webhook, conformance, and docs. But I know this concept has been kicking around for quite a while. So if we want to revisit it, I'm welcome to. I'm open to that.
The reason I reviewed it was it popped in my notifications when Harry tagged it V1 Alpha 2. So what does that label actually mean? Does that mean we're considering it for V1 Alpha 2, or we're committed, we're probably going to do it, or what does that really mean?
I added that before we made that decision, I think, where we were going to do additive changes even in V1 Alpha 1. So I think that milestone can be removed now. I think we can. That's the reason I added it, and I think so. I have gone ahead and labeled one PR which has a breaking change, and added that to the V1 Alpha 2 milestone to keep track of it. Where breaking changes only can go into V1 Alpha 2.
Yeah.
But Micah, I mean, that was probably not correct on my part.
Yeah, it made sense at the time where, we thought that new significant changes would be resolved for V1 Alpha 2. But based on our latest versioning discussions, it sounds like we will make additive changes in V1 Alpha 1, and this would be an additive change. So yeah, I think we can remove the milestone and reserve it for, like you're saying, breaking changes or potentially breaking changes. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, Rob, you noticed my comment there too. Is I think if I go back, I'm trying to remember how this all started, but I think Knative was the big use case for adding the connection timeouts and so forth. And you see in my comment that actually deprecated that. So
interesting. And retries.
Yep.
Okay. Huh. I guess they've got issues. I'll have to read up on that. Interesting.
Yeah, I haven't dug into it. It just came across my radar, so I wanted to make sure that you noted that in the PR.
Appreciate it. Cool. Well, I think we're at time. Thank you everyone for all the great discussion today, and I guess we'll talk to you all next week. Don't forget, if you want to get anything in for KubeCon, definitely go ahead. It looks like there's some interest in a panel proposal. Maybe we can coordinate a bit on Slack. I think there's someone from Google that might be interested. I don't know, but yeah, I'd be interested in digging a little bit deeper to see if we have a group that might be interested there. Cool. But with that, have a great rest of your day and week, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks.
Thanks.